Welcome to the Strong Guy Storytime with me, the Strong Guy. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and we'll be doing part 2 of the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok and his sons, reading chapters 11 through to 15. Hope you enjoy. Let's get to it. Chapter 11. Sigurd had a foster father, and he had to take care of both preparing the ships and getting men, so they would all be ready. They worked so quickly that the force that Sigurd was in charge of was ready when 3 nights had passed. He had 5 ships all well equipped. When 5 nights were passed, Witzig and Bjorn had gotten 14 ships ready. When 7 nights had passed from the time when they had made their plans and announced the voyage, Ivar had 10 ships and Aslaug another 10. Now they all met together, and each told the others how great a force he had raised. Ivar said that he had sent a force of knights by land. Aslaug said, "If I knew that land force would be of use, they might have sent a great host." "We can't delay," said Ivar. "We must leave now, with such forces as we have drawn together." Aslaug said that she would go with them, "and I know clearly what measures must be taken to avenge the brothers." "This is certain," said Ivar. "You will not come on our ships. If you wish, you shall command the land forces." She said that it would be so. Now her name was changed, and she was called Randalin. Now both of the forces set out, and Ivar told the other force where they should meet. Both of them travelled well and met at the place which had been agreed on. And where they landed in Sweden, King Eystein's kingdom, they went harrying. They burned everything in front of them, killed every mother's son, and even more, they killed every living thing. Chapter 12. It happened that some men escaped and found King Eystein. They told him that a great host had come to his kingdom, so hostile that they had left nothing undamaged. They had laid waste every place that they had passed through, and not a house was still standing. When King Eystein heard these tidings, he realized who these raiders must be. He had the war arrows sent through all his kingdom, and summoned all his men who wanted to lend him their aid, and who could bear arms and shields. "We shall have us with the cow Sibylla, our god, and let her charge ahead of the host. I expect that it will go as before, that they will not be able to withstand her bellowing. I will encourage all my men to help as best they can, and we shall drive away this great host and evil host." It was done. Sibylla was let loose. Ivar saw her coming, and heard the savage bellowing coming from her. He ordered all his men to make a great uproar, clashing their weapons and shouting battle cries, so they should hear as little as possible of the voice of this evil creature which came against them. Ivar sent to his bearers that they should carry him to the attack, as far forward as they could. "When that cow comes at us, throw me at her, and one of 2 things will happen. Either I shall lay down my life, or else she will get her death. Now you must take a large tree and carve it into a bow shape, and arrows with it." Then he was brought the huge bow and the great arrows which he had ordered made, but no one thought that either would be useful as a weapon. Now Ivar encouraged every man to help as best he could. His forces advanced, making a great noise, and Ivar was carried in front of their ranks. There was such a great noise at Sibylla bellowing that they heard it just as clearly as if they were silent and standing still. It frightened them so much that all the men wanted to fight each other, except for the brothers. But when this terrible thing happened, Ivar's bearers saw that he drew his bow as if it were a flimsy elm twig. It seemed to them that he overdrew the arrows with the points behind the bow. Now they heard his bowstring twang so loudly they had never heard it that way before, and they saw how his arrows flew as fast as if he had shot them from the strongest crossbow, and so straight that every arrow pierced Sibylla's eyes. She fell down and then tumbled head over heels, and her bellows became much worse than before. And when she came at them, he asked them to throw him at her, and it became as light to them as if they were throwing a little child. But they were not very close to the cow when they threw him. Then he landed on the back of the cow Sibylla, and he became as heavy as if he were a boulder, and fallen on her Every bone in her body was broken, and she died from this. Now he ordered men to pick him up as soon as possible. When he was lifted up, his voice became so piercing that it seemed to all the fighters that he spoke as if he was next to them, although he was standing far away. He gave his orders in complete silence, and he ended his speech in this way. The hostility which was their reason for coming would be over soon, and nothing had hurt them, because their forces had fought for only a short time. Now Ivar encouraged them to do their worst to their enemies. And now it seems that the most deadly one, that cow, is killed. Both of the forces had formed up in ranks, and they went into battle. The fight was so fierce that all the Swedes said that they had never been in such a fight. The brothers Witzig and Bjorn advanced so fiercely that none of the ranks could withstand them. Now so many of King Eysteins' forces fell that few were left standing, and some turned and fled. And so the battle ended. King Eystein fell, and the brothers won the victory. They granted a truce to the survivors. Now Ivar said that he didn't want to harry any longer in that land, because that land was now leaderless, and I would rather that he set sail to where a greater force is facing us. But Randalin went home with some of the men. Chapter 13. Now they made plans among themselves to raid in the southern realm. Sigurd Snake in the Eye, Randalin's son, went with the brothers on every raiding journey. On this voyage they set a course for every sizable town and conquered it, so that none withstood them. They heard about a certain town, which was both large and populous, and strongly built. Ivar said that he wanted to head there. This is said about how the town was named and who ruled it. The chieftain was called Vifil, and from his name the town was called Visselborg. Now they harried so fiercely that they laid waste all the towns that they encountered until they came to Visselborg. The chieftain was not at his home in his town, and many men had gone with him. The brothers set up their tents on the plain which was next to the town. They were peaceful on the day when they came to the town, and they held a parley with the townsmen. They asked them whether they would rather give up the town, in which case peace would be granted to all, or whether they would take it by their overwhelming force and fierceness. Then no one would be offered a truce. But the townsmen dismissed them quickly, and said that they would never win that town by getting them to surrender it. You must first be tested, and show us your valour and eagerness. Now the night passed, and the next day they set out to conquer the town, and accomplished nothing. They surrounded the town for half a month, and tried every day to conquer it, trying various strategies, but the longer they kept trying, the more distant the prospect seemed. They intended to turn back, and when the townsmen became aware that they intended to turn back, they went out onto the town walls. They spread out bolts of costly fabric over the walls with all of the most beautiful clothes in the town, and over them they arranged gold and greatest treasures of the town. Now one of the soldiers spoke up and said, "We thought that these men, the sons of Ragnar and their followers, were valiant men, but we can now say that they have done no better than the others." After that they whooped at them and beat their shields and egged them on as much as they could. When Ivar heard that, it greatly affected him. He got a great sickness from this, so that he could not move, and they had to wait for him to either get better or else perish. He lay there all day till evening, not speaking a word. Then he said to the men who were near him that they should tell Bjorn, Witzig and Sigurd that he wanted to meet with them and all the wisest men, and they all came to the same place, the greatest chieftain and their forces. Ivar asked if they had come up with any plan that was more likely to succeed than the ones they had had before. They all answered that they didn't have the wit to come up with strategies that would win them victory. But now, as often before, your plan would be useful. Then Ivar answered, "One plan which we haven't tried has come into my mind. Here there is a great forest, not far away. When it becomes dark, we shall leave our tents and go to the forest in secret, but the tents shall stay behind. When we come into the woods, every man shall tie up a bundle of sticks for himself. When that is done, we shall surround the town on all sides and set the wood on fire. A huge fire will be made, and the town walls will lose their mortar from the fire. We shall then bring up catapults and test how hard the walls are." And it was done. They went to the forest and stayed there for as long as Ivar thought fit. Then they went to the town according to his plan. When they had started the great fire with the wood, there was such a great blaze that the walls could not withstand it, and lost their mortar. Then they brought catapults to the town and tore many gaps in the walls, and now the battle began. As soon as they faced each other in battle, the townsfolk forces fell. But some fled, and so their dealings ended. They killed every man's child in the town and took all the wealth, but burned the town before they went away. Chapter 14. Now they set off from there until they came to the town called Luna. By then they destroyed nearly every fort and every castle in all of the southern realms, and now they were so famous in every household, there was not a child, no matter how little, who didn't know their names. They intended not to stop until they came to Rome, because that city was said to be both large and populous, and famous and wealthy. But they didn't know exactly how long a journey it was to there, and they had so many men that provisions couldn't be obtained. They were in the town of Luna discussing their journey among themselves. A man came up, old and good-natured. They asked what kind of man he was. He said he was a poor beggar, and had travelled to the land all his life. "You must know many tidings to tell us. Which would you like to know?" The old man answered, "I do not know any question that you might ask about my land I don't know the answer to. What we want is for you to tell us how far the journey is from here to Rome." He replied, "I can show you something as a sign. You see here there are 2 iron shoes which I have on my feet. They are now old, and these others that I carry on my back are now broken. But when I left Rome, I tied on my feet these broken ones, which I now have on my back. And back then both pairs were new. I have been on that journey ever since." When the old man said this, they realized that they could not go on the journey to Rome as they had intended. Now they had their men turn back and conquer many towns that had never been taken before, and the signs of this may be seen to this day. Chapter 15. Now we take up the story where Ragnar was staying at his home in his kingdom. He did not know where his sons were, nor Randalin, his wife, and he heard every one of his men say that no one was the equal of his sons, and it occurred to him that no one was as famous as they. Now he thought about how he might seek for fame that would be no less fleeting. He thought of a plan, and got himself shipwrights, and had timber felled for 2 great ships. The people saw that they were 2 transports, so large that none like them had been made in the Northlands, and along with them he ordered a great store of weapons from all his kingdom. From these events, people found out that he meant to go on some war expedition of his own, away from his lands. The news was heard widely in those countries that were nearest. Now men and all the kings who ruled these lands feared that they might not be able to stay in their lands or kingdoms. Every one of them had a watch set on his land. On one occasion, Randalin asked Ragnar what journey he was planning for himself. He told that he intended to go to England, and to have no more ships than 2 transports, and the men that would fit in them. Randalin said, "This journey which you are proposing seems careless to me. I would think it advisable for you to have more ships, and smaller ones." "There is no glory in that," he said, "if men should conquer a land with many ships. But there are no old tales about how such a land as England was won with 2 ships, and if I am defeated, then the fewer ships I have taken away from my land, the better." Randalin answered, "It seems no less expensive to me, instead of building these ships, for you to have many long ships for this journey. But you know that it is bad for ships to sail for England. If it happens that your ship is wrecked, even if the men manage to come to land, they will have to surrender right away if the lord of the land comes here. It's better to steer long ships into harbour than transports." Now Ragnar spoke a verse: "Let no man spare the Rhine's amber. If he wants seasoned warriors, it's harmful for the helm-wise to hoard rings rather than troops. It's hard to defend the fortress gates with flame-red golden treasures. Many kings have lost their lives, though their riches live on after." He had his ships loaded and got himself a host of men, so the transports were fully loaded. Now his intentions were clear, and he spoke a verse: "What does the ring-baker hear? Come from the rocks howling, and the flinger of hand fire must forsake his fleet sea serpents. Yet I, who freely scatter all the forearm's layings, shall bear with his plan bravely. Brooch Bill, if the gods will. When his ships were made ready, along with the host that should go with him, and then with a wind came that seemed favourable, Ragnar said that he had to go to the ships. When he was ready, he led her to the ships. Before they parted, she said that she would reward him for the shirt which he had given to her. He asked how she would do it. She spoke this verse: "Stitched and seamed nowhere, this long shirt I give you. Out of whole grey hair strands, with a high heart I wove it. No wound will be bloody, nor will weapons bite you, if you have this hallowed tunic, made holy by the gods." He said that he would accept this advice. When they parted, it was clear that she was deeply moved by their parting. Now Ragnar steered his ships to England, as he had planned. He encountered rough weather, so that he wrecked both of his ships on the coast of England. But all his forces came to land, and they held on to their clothing and weapons, and where he came upon villages and towns and castles, he took them. The king who ruled over England was named Aelle. He received news that Ragnar had left his own country. He had set men to keep watch so that he might know immediately if the host attacked his land. Now men went to meet with King Aelle and told him the news of war. He had a summons sent throughout all his kingdom, causing every man who could wield a shield and ride a horse and who dared to fight to come to him. He got together such a great host that it was a wonder. King Aelle prepared himself for battle. Then he said to his men, "If we gain the victory in this battle, if you become aware that Ragnar has come, then you must not raise a weapon against him, because he has left sons behind who will never leave us alone if he falls." Ragnar now prepared himself for battle. He had the shirt that Randling had given him at their parting worn over his mail coat, and he had in his hand the spear with him which he had vanquished the serpent which lay around Thora's house, which no one else had dared. He had no other protection except for a helm, and where they met, the battle began. Ragnar had much smaller forces. The battle had not gone on long before many of Ragnar's men fell, but wherever he went, the host fell back before him. He broke through the ranks that day, and wherever he hewed or struck shields, mail or helms, his blows were so strong that no one withstood them. But he was never struck or shot. Not one weapon did him harm. He never received a wound, but he killed a great many of King Aelle's men. Yet the battle ended in this way. All of Ragnar's forces were killed, and he was pressed down with shields and so taken prisoner. Now he was asked who he was, but he was silent and didn't answer. Then King Aelle said, "This man must be put through a greater trial. If he will not tell us who he is, I will cast him in an enclosure of serpents and let him sit there for a very long time. If he says anything by which we may discern that he is Ragnar, he will be taken out as fast as possible." This was done to him straight away. He sat there for a very long time, such that the snakes were fastened themselves onto him. The men said, "This man is mighty. No weapons bit him all day, and now none of the snakes will hurt him." King Aelle said that he was to be stripped of the clothes that he had outermost, and it was done, and the snakes hung on to him with all their might. Then Ragnar said, "The piglets would grunt now if they knew what how the old pig suffers." Though he spoke in this way, they didn't clearly realize that it was Ragnar rather than another king. Now he spoke a verse: "I have fought against foes in 51 battles in all, which seems a splendid feat. I did scathe to many men. I never imagined a snake for the ending of my life. Many things may happen, which men themselves expect least." And he spoke again: "The piglets would protest loudly if the boar's plight they knew. Death has been dealt to me. Snakes are in my flesh house and savagely stab me. Serpents suck my life out. Beside the beasts I'll die now. Soon I will be a corpse." Then he laid down his life, and he was carried out of there. King Aelle realized that Ragnar had died. Now he thought about himself, how he should take precautions or manage affairs, so that he might hold on to his kingdom, to find out how it would affect Ragnar's sons when they heard of it. He hit upon a plan. He had a ship readied and got a man to carry out his plan, who was both wise and hardy, and he got men so that the ship was well crewed. He said that he wanted to send them to meet Ivar and his brothers, and tell them of the fall of their father. But the trip seemed most unlikely to succeed, so that few wanted to go. Then the king said, "On this mission you must carefully observe how each of the brothers reacts to his news. Set your course as soon as you get the fair winds." He had provided for their journey so that they needed nothing else, and now they left, and their journey went well. The sons of Ragnar had raided in the southern realms. Then they returned back to the Northlands, intended to visit the kingdoms that Ragnar ruled. They didn't know how this war journey had gone. Though they were very curious about how it had turned out, they came up from the southern lands. Everywhere that men heard that the brothers were coming, they feared for their towns and fled, carrying their wealth away, so the brothers' forces hardly had any food. One morning, Bjorn Ironsides awoke and spoke a verse. "Here flies each fair morning over these fortresses the hail hawk of the slain. He'll die hungry, without luck. He should go south over sands, where sore wounds we have made. Drink the gore of the dead men, dew that wells from axe cuts." And he also said, "When we reaved in the realm of the Roman kingdom, I first took up Frey's name, where fighters were well matched, where I showed my sword. Eagles screamed over corpses for the murderous man scathe of the grey moustached ones." Well, there you have it, the part 2 of the Saga of Ragnar Lothbrok and his sons, chapters 11 through 15. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully not so long a gap this time between parts. See you again soon. Stay well. Skål.